Under the thatched roof ramada that ran the length of the agency office, Traversin slouched in a canvas-backed chair, his boots propped against one of the support posts. His gaze took in the sun-beaten, grey adobe buildings, all one-story structures, that rimmed the vacant quadrangle. It was a glaring, depressing scene of sun on rock, without a single shade tree or graceful feature to redeem the squat ugliness. There was not a living soul in sight. Earlier that morning, his White Mountain Apache charges had received their 2-week supply of beef and flour. By now they were milling about the cook fires in front of their wickiups, eating up a 2-week ration in 2 days. Most of the Indians had built their wickiups 3 miles farther up the Gila, where the flat, dry land began to buckle into rock-strewn hills. There the thin, sparse Gila cottonwoods grew taller and closer together, and the mesquite and prickly pear thicker. And there was the small game that sustained them when their government rations were consumed. At the agency, Traversin lived alone. By actual count there were 42 Coyotero Apache scouts along with the interpreter, Barney Fry, and his wife, a Tonto woman, but as the officers at Fort Thomas looked at it, he was living alone. There is no question that to most young Eastern gentlemen on Frontier Station, such an alien means of existence would have meant nothing more than a very slow way to die, with boredom reading the services. But, of course, they were not Traversin. From Whipple Barracks, through San Carlos and on down to Fort Huachuca, it went without argument that Eric Traversin was the best Apache campaigner in Arizona Territory. There was a time, of course, when this belief was not shared by all and the question would pop up often, along the trail, in the barracks at Fort Thomas, or in a Globe barroom. Barney Fry's name would always come up then, though most discounted him for his 1/4 Apache blood. But that was a time in the past when Eric Traversin was still new. Before the sweltering Sandrock Apache country had burned and gouged his features, leaving his gaunt face deep chiseled and expressionless. That was while he was learning that it took an Apache to catch an Apache. So, for all practical purposes, he became one. Barney Fry taught him everything he knew about the Apache. Then he began teaching Fry. He relied on no one entirely, not even Fry. He followed his own judgment, a judgment that his fellow officers looked upon as pure animal instinct. And perhaps they were right. But Traversin understood the steps necessary to survival in an enemy element. They weren't included in Cook's cavalry tactics. You learned them the hard way, and your being alive testified that you had learned well. They said Traversin was more of an Apache than the Apaches themselves. They said he was cold-blooded, sometimes cruel. And they were uneasy in his presence. He had discarded his cotillion demeanor the first year at Fort Thomas, and in its place was the quiet, pulsing fury of an Apache war dance. This was easy enough for the inquisitive to understand. But there was another side to Eric Traversin. For 3 years he had been acting as agent at the Camp Gila sub-agency, charged with the health and welfare of over 200 White Mountain Apaches. And in 3 years he had transformed nomadic hostiles into peaceful agriculturalists. He was a dismounted cavalry officer who sometimes laid it on with the flat of his saber, but he was completely honest. He understood them and took their side, and they respected him for it. It was better than San Carlos. That's why the conversation at the officers' mess at Fort Thomas, 30 miles southwest, so often dwelled on him. He was a good Samaritan with a Spencer in his hand. They just didn't understand him. They didn't realize that actually he was following the line of least resistance. He was accepting the situation as it was and doing the best job with the means at hand. To Traversin it was that simple, and fortunately he enjoyed it, both the fighting and the pacifying. The fact that it made him a better cavalryman never entered his mind. He had forgotten about promotions. By this time he was too much a part of the savage everyday existence of Apache country. He looked at the harsh, rugged surroundings, and liked what he saw. He shuffled his feet up and down the porch pole and sank deeper into his camp chair. Suddenly in his breast he felt the tenseness. His ears seemed to tingle and strain against an unnatural stillness, and immediately every muscle tightened. But as quickly as the strange feeling came over him, he relaxed. He moved his head no more than 2 inches, and from the corner of his eye saw the Apache crouched on hands and knees at the corner of the Ramada. The Indian crept like an animal across the porch, slowly, and with his back arched. A pistol and a knife were at his waist, but he carried no weapon in his hands. Traversin moved his right hand across his stomach and eased open the holster flap. Now his arms were folded across his chest, with his right hand gripping the holstered pistol. He waited until the Apache was less than 6 feet away before he wheeled from his chair and pushed the long-barreled revolving pistol into the astonished Apache's face. Traversin grinned at the Apache and holstered the handgun. "Maybe someday you'll do it." The Indian grunted angrily. With victory almost in his grasp, he had failed again. Gatito, sergeant of Traversin's Apache scouts, was an old man, the best tracker in the army, and it cut his pride deeply that he was never able to win their wager. Between the two men was an unusual bet of almost 2 years standing. If at any time, while not officially occupied, the scout was able to steal up to the officer and place his knife at Traversin's back, a bottle of whiskey was his. For such a prize the Indian would gladly crawl through anything. He tried constantly, using every trick he knew, but the officer was always ready. The result was a grumbling, thirsty Indian, but an officer whose senses were razor sharp. Traversin even practiced staying alive. Gatito gave the report of the morning patrol and then added, almost as an afterthought, "Chiricahua come." 2 miles away. Traversin wheeled from the office doorway. "Where?" Gatito spoke impassively. "Chiricahua come. He come with troop from fort." Traversin considered the Apache's words in silence, squinting through the afternoon glare toward the wooden bridge across the Gila that was the end of the trail from Thomas. They would come from that direction. "Go get Fry immediately. And turn out your boys."